Hello and welcome to And Q with me, Lucy Gray. Today with me is Guy Saich, former BBC News lighting director who for more than 40 years was involved in some of the biggest stories and changes at the BBC. Hello to you. I'm going to take a bit of a gallop through your career now. You ready for this?
I think so, thank you.
You've had your powder done.
I have.
This is an interesting one for you to be on this side of the camera for a change, isn't it?
Very much so, yes.
So let's start with, I suppose, how it all began. What made you want to get into this industry in the first place?
I've always had an interest in music. Became a DJ sort of in the late 70s.
With decks?
It was record decks and hauling up big crates of records.
Yeah.
Went to college, did a diploma in engineering, kept applying to the BBC, and then eventually in 1982 got the call for the interview and then got the job.
Yeah, and so you moved into, I mean, you say you kept applying for the BBC. What was it about the BBC that you were so attracted to in particular?
I always said that when I was at college that I wanted to work for the BBC and I wanted to work for Radio 1, and I got laughed at. And when I joined as a technical operator in radio, obviously for the BBC because it is the best, and a lot of the time working on Radio 1.
And you got involved, first of all, in hospital radio?
Yes, I did stints on the hospital radio presenting as well, which I enjoyed, and then obviously the disco DJ side as well. Yeah,
so you were chatty. You were a chatty DJ.
To a degree, yes.
Yeah. So how did it come about? Because you obviously know that you had this big career at the BBC. How did it all start?
Well, obviously it started with me in radio. I did about 5.5 years working in the main sound control room, working a lot on Radio 1, Radio 2, and also continuity for Radio 3 and Radio 4. And then the opportunity arose in 1988 to go over to News on Attachment because a lot of people were moving over or leaving the BBC to go to TV-AM. So I applied for the attachment and initially got 6 months and then got the job.
We'll come back to that in a minute, but if we could start with, because you had quite a strict training course in the initial stages, didn't you? It was quite cutthroat, wasn't it? Tell me about that.
It was 3 months residential at the BBC's training centre at Wood Norton in Evesham, where in essence you learnt how the BBC did things, and there was sort of a mixture of operational and engineering. And you had to get 60% pass mark for the operational tests that they did each and every week, which was a multi-choice, push A, push B, or whatever. And one of them I got 59.5%.
Oh, that's not good enough.
I know, but luckily I survived, obviously, to...
Oh, they were okay with that?
Yes, from what I can remember, yes.
Snuck through. But it was quite brutal, it was quite sort of pressured, wasn't it?
Very much so. In those days, it was, I say regimental, but it was, you had to learn and ask questions, and obviously the dreaded test as well. So yes. And
then, so talk me through what you then progressed into after you made it through the rigorous training. What your areas were.
The main areas that we worked in London Control Room, which was the hub of sound for radio and some of the communications for television. So we set up communications for outside broadcasting television. We set up OBs, outside broadcasts for radio that were coming from anywhere in the UK, coming into Broadcasting House and switching a lot of material around. The other side was working in the studios for Radio 1, Radio 2, Radio 3, and Radio 4, and because I was a young sort of 20-year-old working a lot on Radio 1 with a lot of the big name DJs such as Simon Bates, Steve Wright, John Peel, Kenny Everett on Radio 2. So, I was very, very privileged, very lucky with who I worked with.
And all the sort of modern technology at the time, which would have been things like tape machines and
oh yes,
turntables and
It was. I mean, to edit, we would record whatever, music or voice onto a 1/4-inch tape machine whirling around, and then we would then literally razor cut the tape together, which...
You couldn't get it wrong, could you?
No. I mean, on some of the programs, I would literally be walking around with strands of tape around my neck, sort of...
no undo button.
No. Gosh, it's where did I put that, sort of there? So, but they taught you so well, and I used to love, for instance, on the John Donne program on Radio 2, they would have someone come in and talk about their new book or whatever, and maybe because they weren't professional, they, did and ums. So I would sit there with my headphones on at the end of it, de-erring and de-umming, just tightening up so it flowed better. I just loved it.
It makes them look a bit better and a bit more fluent than they really are, though, doesn't it? I mean, this is a whole nother discussion about whether it's all okay or not.
I think editorially it was acceptable. So yes, that's another story.
De-umming is fine.
Yes.
You mentioned Steve Wright. I have to ask you apparently about a jacket. Steve Wright and a jacket.
Right. Now, the story with that was, it was May 1983, and I was working on Steve's program, and during the rehearsal he came out to talk to us, and I said to Steve, "You look a bit sort of fed up." He said, "Oh, I've got the 1000th Top of the Pops at Television Centre tonight. I don't know what I'm going to wear," and he was quite sort of worried about it. And on the back of my chair was my blue jacket.
This is your blue jacket.
My blue jacket, and he sort of eyeing it up, and he said, "Oh, who's that?" And I said, "Oh, it's mine. Could I try it on?" And he was the same sort of size as me then, and he tried it on. He said, "Oh, could I borrow it?" So the story was, Steve went off and wore that on Top of the Pops, the 1000th Top of the Pops. And I went home to Walthamstow on the tube with Steve Wright, Radio 1, Steve Wright blazoned on me. So working with Steve the next day, he returned dutifully the jacket, smelling of perfume.
I'm not going to ask.
So that's the story.
And you're sticking to it, Carl.
I am. Yes.
It's quite a lot of pressure to go to suddenly to be dealing with such big names, isn't it? Though, for somebody who's made their way up or whatever, to suddenly being exposed and dressing, these famous names. How prepared were you for that? Did it faze you?
I don't think it fazed me. When I started my first few days at Broadcasting House, we were sort of shown around all the different areas, and I was in the Radio 2 area, and I went off to the gents to do what you do, and I was just standing there minding my own business, and this gentleman sort of stood next to me and started talking to me, and I turned around thinking, it's an Irish accent. It was Terry Wogan. And I think, you just fell into working with, they were your colleague, you work with them. They were the star, but without sounding too sort of big-headed, without us in the back room, then we wouldn't make their program sound as good as it did. So,
they couldn't do it without you, could they?
No, and we always just looked on them as equal.
Yeah, and they made you feel like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, really relaxed.
So, talk us through how your career then developed from there.
In 1988, the opportunity arose for me to go from radio over to television news at Television Centre, because they were finding a lot of people were leaving to go and work on TVM, so they were offering a lot of attachments, and I thought that would be a good opportunity, so I boarded for it, got the job. Well, not the job.
That's BBC speak, boarded.
Sorry, yes.
Interviewed,
sorry, yes. So I interviewed for the position and got a 6-month attachment, did the 6 months and then got the job. But I was very lucky that in those days they offered sort of you to move around all the different areas. So I went down to the multi-format area on the 3rd floor and learned all about telecine, all the tape formats, the 2-inch, which was the old original format, the 1-inch, standards converting from different formats from around the world, and then up to the main play-out area. In those days, it wasn't computers playing out material, it was all off cassette. So there was an operation again for playing up to the gallery. Then I moved up to the gallery, working on, not sound, but on lighting, originally as what they called the Vision 2, which was working the robotic cameras, because in those days it was all robotic cameras and twiddling, getting the colours right on the cameras, and then moving over to being a Vision 1, where you went on the studio floor with the electrician. He had the pole, setting all the lamps, and then sitting there adjusting all the lamps for the news.
What do you think of the lighting here today?
Brilliant. Absolutely
You have
brilliant.
to say that. It's a big jump, isn't it, from radio to TV? I mean, I know myself, I moved from radio to TV, and it was like everyone was talking a different language.
Yes.
All the acronyms completely, bewildering to me
Yes.
in the beginning. How did you find it?
I think someone described television many years ago as working with a 10-ton, or trying to write with a 10-ton pen, because it had different sort of elements. With radio, you were it. You were sitting the other side of the glass with the DJ, and you were the person. In television, you have a vision mixer, you have a transmission manager, you have a lighting director, you have someone doing cameras, auto cue, graphics, floor manager. So it's just totally different.
It's massive, isn't it?
Oh
in
gosh,
comparison?
yes, yes, it is.
I mean, we can talk a bit later perhaps about how things have changed in terms of what you can now do just by yourself in TV and all of that thing. But in terms of the transition from radio to TV as well, from entertainment to news, there's a big difference, isn't there, in terms of, I suppose, the responsibility of the output and that sort of thing. How did you find that?
I think you just get ingrained in it, whereas entertainment generally was recorded, so they could stop, do a retake. With news, it's pretty well most of the time live, so it has to be right. And you just got sort of honed into that psyche of doing it, and hopefully getting it right each time.
Well, there's a pressure, isn't there? There's a massive pressure.
Yes, there is.
Not to mess up.
No.
And I suppose, especially technically, if people mess up, it's so very obvious, isn't it,
Yes,
as well?
yes.
How are you under pressure? What's your sort of physical reaction, I suppose?
I think I just learned to get used to the pressure. And, if we had a really busy programme, then, the crew, we would then go off and have a cup of tea, very British, very English, and just sit around and chat about it. And I think we just got used to it.
And you stayed in news. You were supposed to be there just for 6 months. But
Yes.
You clearly got the bug.
Yes.
You liked that pressure, really, and
Yeah.
the tea afterwards, obviously.
Yeah, of course, of course.
But let's talk about, the responsibility, I suppose. Just if you can, maybe any examples or something, but, the content that you're working on and that sort of environment.
I think it's just making sure that the presenter can tell the story. So you need to make sure that they're lit. You can get into their eyes because they are telling a story. If you've got someone where you can't see their eyes for whatever reason, then they look very shifty. So you've got the responsibility of lighting the presenter correctly, and then obviously you've then got to make sure that you're lighting each individual guest as well, because the BBC could be sort of, if you were lighting something, that they could be accused of political bias if someone wasn't looking correct. So you need to make sure that you are evenly lighting, maybe, for instance, Labour on one side and Conservative on the other side.
And you thought you'd be dealing with heavy news and political programmes and things like that when you worked on the Andrew Marr show, but they also had bands and
Yes.
dance troupes suddenly turning up. Tell me about that. We've got a lovely picture of a dance troupe somewhere, I think, haven't we? We can, as an example of this.
I think from memory, I was told it was going to be like 10 dancers on the studio floor at the end. So, you just think, okay, I can deal with that. And then they just, during the rehearsal before we went on air, they started piling more and more people onto the floor. I think it was about 30 or 40 people. And I sort of came down onto the studio floor thinking, okay, how are we going to do this?
How long have we got?
And literally, because, you know, obviously the clock is ticking to on air. So, you know, you just have to literally think on your feet. And I've got my scrap of paper scribbling down lamp numbers and where they are. But that's the nature of the job.
And I have to ask you about the last ever breakfast with Frost.
Yes, that was good because it had a celebrity audience, and it was just great to work on.
And a cast of thousands.
It was literally. It was just brilliant to be part of that, you know, because obviously Sir David Frost is such a huge figure, you know, and it was such a privilege to work on the programme and be asked to do the final programme as well.
And then you went on to be a Dom. You're going to have to explain what a Dom is.
Right, a Dom in BBC parlance is Duty Operations Manager. So there are DOMs, Duty Operations Managers, in sort of the key BBC buildings. Specifically for Broadcasting House, there is a Dom. Generally, they have 2 duty managers during the day and then 1 overnight. And they are, I suppose, in essence, just ultimately responsible, firstly and primarily, for the safety of everyone, be it staff or contributors in the building, and then just making sure that everything works correctly and that everything is resilient. So if there are problems, then we step in, or they step in to make sure that everything is working correctly. And then overnight, they are the senior on-duty manager overnight. I mean,
if there's an emergency, they're the person that everybody turns to, right?
Yes. Yeah. And you would get sort of phone calls, and you know, you had to field the phone calls. But if there was an issue, then you had to be there in the thick of it, and you worked very closely with the DFM, the Duty Facilities Manager. So the DFM is responsible for the building and security. So you work sort of hand in hand with them. But being the BBC staff member, then you are ultimately sort of working with them to make sure that everything is safe and working correctly.
I mean, it gets a little bit 007 as well, doesn't it, when we talk about this, because you are the keeper of secrets. Tell me what that means.
Because of the nature of the job, and because the BBC being the national broadcaster, then mainly people look to the BBC in times of crisis. So we have to make sure that we, as duty managers, can inform the audience, and that's sort of key, really, how the BBC puts out information to the audience.
You're not making it sound as interesting as it is, if you don't mind me saying. You're being a little bit coy, because I suppose, first of all, you had to sign the Official Secrets Act, didn't you? So there's a limit as to how much you can say. But there are all sorts of, you know, strange things that you know about that you can tell us about, like secret panels in the walls at the Langham Hotel opposite Broadcasting House and things like that. Tell us about that. Go on.
This was obviously a number of years ago. On a Sunday, certain members of the control room team would go off to what we euphemistically called choir practice, in that they would go over to a building in Duchess Street opposite Broadcasting House and to the Langham before it became a hotel, and check out some of the deferred facilities, or DF in BBC parlance, to make sure that if we needed to, for instance, move out of the building, we had inbuilt resilience that we could then do that. So
if there was an impending attack of some sort, you had this 4-minute warning.
Yes.
Tell us about that. Can you?
I mean, again, it was sort of in the control room there was a cassette player which I think either had music or had the warning, and there were ways of switching that online to all the major networks.
Mainly long wave, presumably Radio 4 long wave?
Well, it would be all, at that time of crisis, it would be all the transmitters, but certainly Radio 4 long wave was the one that we always made sure was resilient and always working.
And there's a bunker, isn't there?
Yes, I'll be very coy. There is somewhere, yes, there is somewhere where the BBC can broadcast resiliently from, yes.
And as a DOM, as a duty operations manager, you would have been the person, I suppose, who would have been gathering people together in the event of such a major emergency, would you, and deciding or making sure everybody got there? Would that be your role?
There would be key people that would be sent up to this particular area to make sure that everything was there. And obviously, if we knew in advance, then it would be manned by key people. Yes.
I mean, it's really interesting to think about the BBC as part of the sort of fabric of a national emergency, isn't it?
Yes.
And that role that it would play, it's perhaps not a lot of people would necessarily think about that or what have you, but I suppose what has changed massively, as we all know, we had that alert to our mobile
Yes.
phones recently, didn't we? The way that has changed is fascinating, and I suppose requires the BBC a bit less now.
I think the technology's changed a lot. I mean, as you rightly touched on, that obviously most people have a mobile phone, and we had that alert. So that's sort of moved on a little bit. And obviously we've now got the internet as well. So people would be looking at the internet for information. But I think, radio is still key to part of that.
Is there anything else that you can tell us about the Langham Hotel and the thing? You were saying about how there are the panels with the things behind them, the controls behind them. Is there anything else about that and the situation at the time there that you're allowed to tell us?
Well, again, without sounding sort of too defensive, it was just behind panels in rooms to make sure that we could pull the panel off and then have a sound mixer and
be fully functioning, basically,
yes.
in a room that doesn't look like a broadcast area.
Yeah, sort of, and that's why we went off and did choir practice pretty well every week.
Yeah, and how long did you have to have worked at the BBC to be given access to these facilities, or to even be told about them?
Certainly, when you were in control room, you start to get within a few years, you started to get a feel of what was going on, and then you had to be certainly within the BBC for a while. And obviously, when I took on the role as a duty manager, I had done a fair sizable, probably maybe about sort of 20 odd years. So, obviously the role involved an understanding of the structure and the resilience and how the operation works as well.
Moving back onto your brushes with celebrity then, shall we? I feel like I've exhausted all of what I'm going to get out of you in terms of anything top secret. Let's move back to some of the celebs that you hung out with or lent your jackets to or whatever. I have to ask you apparently about Chris Evans in an interview.
Oh gosh, yes. I was the broadcast duty manager, which was before the new broadcasting house was rebuilt. So I was specifically the duty manager for radio. I was sitting in the office, got a phone call from Helen Thomas, who is now actually controller Radio 2, but was Chris Evans' producer. Chris had just come back to Radio 2 after being away for a while, and he was doing a Saturday afternoon programme, and Helen rang up and said, "Oh, could you tell me who the BDM, the broadcast duty manager, is next Saturday?" And I said, "Oh, it's me. Oh, could you come in and talk about your job?" And it was a sort of a feature they called One From Home. So I bought this record in, and then I had to go to my boss at the time and say, "I've been asked to talk on Radio 2. Yes, that's fine, but obviously you can't talk about various things." So I then toddled along to the Radio 2 studio Saturday, sat in, and one of the first questions Chris said was, "Oh, I hear you're head of threats."
Shall we have a listen?
Okay, it's time for One From Home. where we feature a brilliant employee of the BBC who brings the record in from home. And today it's Guy Saich. Hi, Guy.
Hi, afternoon, Chris.
Is it Saich or Saich?
It's Saich.
Saich. What a strange surname. Where does that come from?
Old English meaning ditch, I believe.
Old English, sort of from the southern country, southwest?
Essex, I believe.
Essex, not so much then. I don't know, you have the look of a Cornishman about you. Has anybody ever told you that before?
No.
Okay, well, do you think you look slightly Cornish?
Slightly Cornish, yeah.
You're not just agreeing with me,
No,
are
I'm
you?
not just agreeing with you. No, I
If
can
a
imagine
man-
with a kind of like a really kind of like big thick jumper with a big neck, you know?
I think you're going to say big, thick neck?
No,
I've got a very thin neck.
No,
very thin neck.
You do have the look of a Cornishman about you. I didn't think anybody could look Cornish, but you do. You look a little bit like... Who's that brilliant footballer who played for Southampton? Brilliant footballer.
What, Matt Le Tissier?
Yeah, looks a bit like Matt Le Tissier, doesn't he?
Actually, you really do.
You're not
I'm
Matt
not
Le Tissier,
disagreeing with you there.
No.
You are, aren't you? This is a joke, isn't it? This is a big gag.
No.
Okay. So, Guy, do you know what Guy does for a living at the BBC, Pete? He is.
I have no idea.
He is currently the broadcast duty manager. That's what he
Broadcast
does.
duty manager?
Which is just an amazing job. Tell everybody what that involves.
In a nutshell, I basically look after the whole of the operation here at Broadcasting House for the BBC.
The whole thing.
That's the whole.
In a nutshell,
In a
by the way.
nutshell, I look after the BBC. Which bit? All of it.
All of it.
So do you get calls? Are you the guy who takes all the calls?
Yeah. I get loads of calls in a day, and my most recent one was one of the BBC local stations, which I won't mention, wanting to bring into Broadcasting House a live chicken to interview on air.
Right. And what was your response?
No.
Because why?
Health and safety. I know.
Do you know all the rules then?
No, but I've got a good place I can look on the BBC website, which helps me out.
Okay. And so you're in charge of threats, aren't you? You keep us safe from threats.
Yes.
What happens if a threat comes in?
There are things in
Procedures.
place which I can't talk about.
Okay, no, fair enough.
But we need to make sure that obviously the staff remain safe at all times, and we carry on broadcasting to our listeners.
You are the man, my friend. You're the boy.
I believe you look after the whole shebang.
Now, this isn't your permanent job at the BBC, is it? You're acting at the moment. Aren't
That's
you?
right. I'm on attachment for 2 months.
Okay. Do you like? Have you done this job before?
I was here 2 years ago for 3 months.
Do you like it?
It's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. Well, why do you like it so much?
The variety. You have to sort of think on your feet, and what sort of what job could you come in like now? Talk to Chris Evans, come in and have a cup of tea with Terry Wogan, and it's just absolutely
Just hanging with the guys.
Well,
Hanging with the gang.
Yeah,
Out of all the BBC, which is your favourite bit? Is it Radio 2?
all of it.
Oh, okay.
But I like Radio 2 a lot. Yes.
Great. Okay. You
Was
did
that the right answer?
Well, you only referred to Radio 2 people when you said you enjoyed hanging with the cats, didn't you?
Well,
It doesn't matter. I'm not going to cause trouble for you.
no.
But I know my favourite bit of the BBC is Radio 2, and BBC One when I'm on it. And now, you used to be a DJ, a mobile DJ, didn't you?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Because apparently you had a real problem choosing your track from home, your one from home, because your wife said you changed it loads of times.
That's right. The first track I thought of was FM by Steely Dan,
Cool.
and I thought that was. My wife Tracy thought it was a bit too corny.
Right.
So
A bit too MOR.
Yeah, and I wanted to fit in with the happening programme on Radio 2 at this time.
Okay.
So probably 12 or 13 tracks down the line, I chose this.
Sounds like a whole railroad.
It was very agonising, but hopefully the listener will like this track.
You've really gone to work on this one, haven't you?
Yes.
Okay, well, before we say what it is, just tell me the maddest name of a nightclub you used to DJ in. I used to DJ in a nightclub called the Pink Coconut, which is pretty crazy. Which?
I suppose one of them was the Red Knight.
The Red Knight.
At Sinawara and on Hailing Island.
You want to go there, don't you?
It's probably been bulldozed now,
Yeah,
but
well, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's not. I don't know. Anyway, your track is Sir.
it's a brilliant, good feel track, Earth, Wind and Fire and Let's Groove.
There we go. I got way more out of you than he did about the threats, didn't I?
Maybe.
You were coy then, and you're coy now.
Well, yes.
You're the man who said no to the live chicken, though. That is.
I know that will be my epitaph. Yes.
What was it? Were you worried about health and safety? Which bit?
I think at that time we had sort of bird flu, so
Okay.
I just
That's fair enough.
Yeah,
Yeah, there was a good reason.
yeah.
Yeah. It's was that the first time you'd been on Radio 2?
Interviewed, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, why? Had you been on inadvertently?
Well, done bits for Steve Wright. I'd done some of his voices on Radio 1, but that was all, sort of mucking around. But that was the first and only time that I've been on Radio 2 and interviewed under pressure.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because you're turning up for work, you're just doing your normal job, aren't
Yes.
you? Whatever it is that you were expected to do that day, and suddenly you're on the radio, and I expect all your friends are calling you up afterwards to tell you that they heard you and that sort of thing.
They did. One of the stories was one of my colleagues, Tony, he was out driving, and he said afterwards when I saw him that he nearly crashed his car.
Because it was you.
Because it was me, yes, yes.
High point, best bit
What, in my
of
career?
your whole career?
Oh, gosh. I think, to be honest, it's high. I can't really pinpoint one thing, I think, the privilege of working for the BBC and having the breadth and depth of what I was able to do, there are sort of obviously a lot of high points, but I suppose, for me, maybe looking back retrospectively, being a duty manager and what that involved, I think probably was a high point, but there's a lot of other high points as well.
That responsibility.
Yes, yeah, I think so, and it was very, very responsible, but I really took to it.
Yeah, and as part of your job, you had to cover some of the biggest stories,
Yes.
ever. You were on when Princess Diana died.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Got a phone call at 4:10. The last time I had a phone call that early was to tell me my father had died. So picked up the phone, and this was before mobiles, and word for word from the Dom, the duty manager, "Hello, Guy, it's Paul, the Dom. Can you come straight into work? Dodi Fayed has been killed in a car accident, and Diana, Princess of Wales, is gravely injured." So got dressed, driving along the M4, parallel to Windsor Castle. There was the announcement that Diana had died. And I let out an expletive, which I won't repeat, parked the car at Television Centre in the car park, walked up to the studio, and there was big signs, because this was in one of the ground floor studios, saying, "Go up to the new studio, N2 on the 6th floor." And it was chaos, absolute chaos. And they were liaising with presentation, which was BBC One, when we would go on air. And originally it was going to be 6 o'clock. That then moved round to 6:30. And I think we quite literally just fell on air. And in that, I was still relatively junior in my training and experience of lighting. So I lit the main presenter, who was Martin Lewis, and then 2 guests either side. And literally through my 8 or 9 hours on air, just wheeling guests in and out. And I still get emotional now thinking about it. So, yeah.
It was such a shock, wasn't it, to everybody?
Yes.
When Princess Diana died. I suppose there are things in place at the BBC when a member of the royal family dies. There are protocols, there are obituaries that have been prepared and that sort of thing, particularly for the older ones. That,
Yes.
And at that time, I don't know, you perhaps tell me. No, obviously nobody saw this coming. No, everyone was completely in shock. Did they have obituaries prepared for Diana?
I don't honestly know the answer to that, but I think if they hadn't, they would have obviously, from that sort of moment on, because there is an obituary department that does literally obituaries for obviously the royals and also major celebrities, but I can't honestly say whether there was or there wasn't, but it was just literally sort of flying quite literally by the seat of your pants.
Yeah. And also dealing with the shock, I suppose, yourself of hearing the news.
Yes, very, very much so. I think it did affect all the crew really quite badly. As I say, I still get a lump even now when I see any footage.
It's quite strange, isn't it? Because obviously it's somebody you don't know. It's not a personal thing, and it is very hard, isn't it, when you're on air, everything's going on, and you're having to be professional to sort of keep in check your emotional response to news, isn't it?
Yes.
How have you sort of learned to deal with that?
I think talking to your colleagues afterwards and going and getting a cup of tea.
Yeah, tea's the answer. Whatever the question, tea's the answer.
Yes.
Yeah. Did things go on? You're right to carry on talking about
Yes, of course.
that event. Did everything go to plan in terms of the broadcast? Did it work out as you would have liked it to?
I think from my perspective, because I had the forethought to light the positions, so they were just literally bringing guests in, bringing them out. So I think from my point of view, from memory, because obviously it's a number of years ago now, I think yes. And obviously there was huge pressure in the gallery, trying to get everything so it flowed. And obviously Martin Lewis was getting information in his ear, and I think, anything like that, you're starting with nothing. So you're starting with very scant information. And in those days, obviously, you didn't have the information that you do now, or the information flow. So there was very little coming out of Paris. So they were jumping on that and then getting guests in. Obviously, it was still early on a Sunday morning. So, ringing around, getting guests in to Phil, can you come and talk about Diana? So it was just sort of evolving through the whole day.
TV is so exposing, isn't it? I've worked in both radio and TV, and in radio, everything can be sort of flapping around you. You can be sort of looking for different things. You can have your head down. You can have lots of different screens open. You can be searching for things. It's actually it's so much harder actually at TV, isn't it? Because everything is sort of, I suppose it's sort of, as you said before, there's so many different parts.
Yes.
to just get one thing right. Radio, just pick up the phone and bung the person on air, basically, and then you've got your guest. There's so many moving parts that have to be right for it not to look like it's really messy.
Yes, I think if for instance you're getting someone on the phone, then you want obviously the voice to come through so the presenter can ask questions, but you also want that caption, that graphic with their photograph, hopefully, rather than just something very generic. So, you're in television as you are in radio telling the story, but you've got this visual element.
There's probably nothing harder in terms of getting all the moving parts together than an election night broadcast, is there?
Yeah, yes.
It is crazy what the BBC is now capable of in terms of
is.
the numbers of outside sources coming into the building, the contributors. It is absolutely awesome.
It is.
When one is happening, isn't it? Talk to me through your experiences of election night.
I've been very lucky that I've worked on a few. One as the second in command with a lighting director in the main election studio. That was very pressured, but I learned a lot with that. And then working in what the BBC call hubs, where they get all the outside broadcasts from all around the UK and concentrate them into this area and then feed it on to the main production gallery. So I've worked in that. And then last year for the 2024 election, I was the second lighting director in Cardiff for Jeremy Vine and his big board. And again, that was new experience for me. Because Kevin, who was the main lighting director, who designed all the lighting, was unavailable. So I went up and started lighting the whole of this huge stage. And a first for me, whereas I've been used to using fixed lamps with these things called barn doors that you knocked out with a long pole. We were using lamps that were sort of you could control from a console. So it was always a first for me, and it was just the scale of that is just huge, and that's what the BBC does and does well.
You also turned into, I think it's fair to say, a bit of an expert on BBC buildings, didn't you? You've written the book on it. That's a definition of an expert in my mind.
If I could correct you, if I may, my research was used, and it's very sweet of you to say that, but But again, that was purely by accident. I mean, if I could sort of explain, I had a phone call when I was doing the office job a number of years ago from Tony Hall's secretary. Tony Hall, who later became Director General, was the Director of News. And they wanted someone to show around this journalist who was going to apparently do a stinking review on the BBC. So I showed this journalist round, and it was great fun. You know, we sort of walked around all the studios, showed him Television Centre, got a lovely, lovely email from Tony thanking me because apparently in the end he didn't write a stinking review on the BBC. So that was a
all
good
down
thing.
to you, was it?
Well, I can't take the credit for that. So I just thought I would sort of gather some information. So I sent out sort of a few favours and got this booklet back about We Are the BBC, and a lot of the technology in it was out of date. But in the beginning, on the forward, it had about the opening of Television Centre on the 29th of June 1960, but it also had about the Court of Honour, which was part of the Anglo-French exhibition of 1908. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And because this was 1999, we were due to have the 40th anniversary of Television Centre being sort of opened the following year. So I sort of sat down and in my own time did a bit more research. I sent a few emails out, one to Alan Yentob and one to Peter Salmon, who was the controller BBC One. So I got an email back saying, oh, why didn't you go and talk to so-and-so who's a producer? And I then got an email from Peter Salmon's office saying, thank you, but we've got Euro 2000 football on that date or around that time. So I didn't think any more of it. And about a week or two later, I then got a personal email from Peter Salmon saying, oh, could you do a bit more research on this? And can you make an appointment to see Lorraine Hegarty, who later became controller of BBC One, but at that time was the head of production for the BBC. So I did a bit more research, toddled along to her office in January 2000 with 3 or 4 bits of paper and a photocopy of a picture, very, very low tack, sat on her sofa. And she said, we nearly, you know, the BBC nearly missed the anniversary. We're going to make a programme on it. Would you like to work on it? So I then ended up working on the programme as programme consultant with Michael Parkinson, hosting all the programmes that were made at Television Centre in front of another celebrity audience.
Yeah. One last question. Did you ever mess up?
Probably.
You've blanked it out.
Well, there was one occasion which always seems to stick in my mind. In the old news studios, where you sat to do the lighting console, you looked down on where the director sat. And I think on one occasion, because there was a turn in vision, I looked at the wrong monitor. So whereas they were hopefully going to turn into a light, they turned into darkness. So that's, in all honesty,
that's as bad as it gets.
That's honestly the only time. I'm sure there's other things that are sort of parked in the back of my head, but yeah.
We need another hour to get to the bottom of that.
Yeah, probably, yeah, sort of delve back into it, yes.
Well, I will always remember you as the man who said no to the live chicken, I'm afraid. That's
okay,
going to stick
that's
with
going
me.
to be my epitaph, yes.
Thank you so much. Very lovely to talk to you
Lovely.
about the 4 decades.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Guy Saich. Thank you.
Thank you.